My name is Emily, and for 10 years I lived what most people would call the perfect married life. My husband, Jason, was a successful businessman, admired by everyone for his charisma and ambition. To outsiders, we looked like the dream couple, stable, happy, and deeply in love. But behind closed doors, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Jason's work often kept him away, traveling for weeks at a time. At first, I tried to fill the lonely nights with hobbies and friends, but over time, the emptiness began to gnaw at me. That's when Kevin came into my life. He was everything Jason wasn't: playful, spontaneous, and daring. Kevin made me feel alive again, as if I were escaping a dull reality and stepping into a world of excitement. For 6 months, Kevin and I met in secret, our affair carefully hidden from Jason. Guilt tried to creep in every now and then, but I pushed it away, convincing myself that I deserved this spark of joy. After all, Jason was hardly around to notice. One evening, Kevin and I were at our usual spot, a small hotel room far from prying eyes. We laughed, drank, and indulged in our secret. Everything felt normal, even thrilling, until Kevin decided to spice things up. "Let's give Jason a little surprise," Kevin said, laughing as he grabbed his phone. Before I could react, he had started a FaceTime call with Jason. My heart sank. "Hey, Jason," Kevin said, his voice dripping with mockery. He panned the camera to me and smirked. "See how skilled she is? I've been training her for you." My shock turned into nervous laughter, thinking it was just a stupid prank. But deep down, an unsettling fear began to build. I had no idea that the next hour would become the worst nightmare of my life. As I sat frozen in shock after Kevin's reckless stunt, I couldn't help but wonder, what was he thinking? But as I glanced at his smug face, a chilling realization began to dawn on me. This wasn't a random act of stupidity. Kevin had a reason for doing this, a reason far more sinister than I could have imagined. Jason and Kevin had known each other for years, but their relationship was far from friendly. They were rivals, plain and simple, both in business and in life. Jason was the kind of man who commanded respect effortlessly, while Kevin always lived in his shadow, bitter and resentful. Whenever their paths crossed at events or meetings, the tension was palpable. Kevin never missed a chance to mock Jason or undermine him, while Jason, with his usual composure, dismissed Kevin like an annoying fly. I should have realized that Kevin's interest in me wasn't purely about attraction. Looking back, there were subtle signs: his probing questions about Jason's business, the way he pushed me to complain about my marriage, and his over-the-top reactions whenever I expressed frustration with Jason. It wasn't love, it was strategy. Kevin had been using me as a pawn in his twisted game of revenge. To him, I wasn't just Jason's wife. I was a trophy, a weapon to humiliate Jason in the cruelest way possible. And I had fallen right into his trap, blind to the bigger picture. As I pieced it all together, a wave of nausea hit me. I felt stupid, used, and helpless. Jason had always been Kevin's target, and now, through me, Kevin had found the ultimate way to hurt him. But what I didn't know was just how far Jason would go to reclaim his dignity. Kevin had started this war, but Jason was about to end it, and I was caught in the crossfire. An hour after Kevin's prank, Jason stormed into the hotel room. The force of the door being kicked open startled us both. I barely had time to pull the blanket over myself before Jason stepped inside, his expression calm, too calm. That kind of silence was more terrifying than any outburst. He wasn't yelling or screaming. Instead, he simply stood there, staring at us with an intensity that made the air in the room feel suffocating. Kevin, however, didn't flinch. He smirked, leaning back against the headboard like he was enjoying the show. "Took you long enough," Kevin said mockingly, gesturing toward the empty chair in the room. "Care to join us, Jason? Or would you rather watch?" Jason didn't respond. Slowly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out something that made my blood run cold. A Magnum revolver. He didn't aim it, didn't say a word, just let it dangle loosely at his side. "What's the plan here, Jason?" Kevin said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "You're going to shoot me? Go ahead. But think about how this will look when the police find your wife here. With me." Jason finally spoke, his voice eerily calm. You think I'm stupid, Kevin? You think I don't know why you're here? This isn't about Emily. It never was. You wanted to hurt me. You've been planning this for years, haven't you? Kevin's smirk faltered for a second, but quickly returned. Planning what? To show your wife what a real man looks like? Yeah, maybe I did. That's when Jason did something I never expected. He smiled, a cold, calculating smile. You're not as clever as you think you are, Kevin. Did you really think I wouldn't find out about your little scheme? You've been leaking fake stories about my company to the press, sabotaging deals, trying to ruin me. You thought using my wife would be the final blow. But here's the thing. When you play games with me, Kevin, you don't win, you lose, badly. Kevin's confidence wavered, but he tried to hide it. What are you talking about? Jason reached into his pocket with his free hand and tossed something onto the bed. It was a USB drive. Everything you've been doing, emails, phone calls, transactions, it's all on there. You didn't cover your tracks nearly as well as you thought you did. You've been sloppy, Kevin, and now I have everything I need to destroy you. Kevin's face drained of color. For the first time that night, he looked genuinely scared. You're bluffing. Jason shook his head. You've already lost. You just don't know it yet. And that's when it hit me. Jason had known about the affair all along. He had been watching, waiting, and now he was ready to deliver the final blow. The room was suffocating silent now. The sound of Kevin's shallow breathing filled the air as Jason kept the gun at his side, never taking his eyes off him. Kevin's earlier arrogance was gone, replaced with something I hadn't expected: fear. You really thought you had the upper hand, didn't you? Jason said, his voice steady, almost pitying. But you underestimated me, Kevin. I've been a step ahead of you this whole time. While you were busy playing games with my wife, I was quietly collecting evidence, building my case. You thought I didn't know what was happening under my nose. But the truth is, I knew everything. And now? Now you'll regret it. Kevin, who had always been so confident, now seemed like a man who had realized the depth of his mistakes. His bravado was gone. What are you going to do? He stammered. Jason didn't respond immediately. He just looked at me, his gaze piercing, like he was silently reading me. I had been complicit in all of this. My affair, my betrayal, and my blindness to Kevin's true intentions. Jason was no fool. He had known I was unfaithful long before I ever thought he suspected. I'm going to ruin you, Jason finally said to Kevin, his voice low and dangerous. You're going to lose everything you've worked for. Your company, your reputation. And I'm going to make sure the world knows exactly who you are. You're a traitor, Kevin. And I'm going to make sure your downfall is as public as possible. Kevin's eyes darted to the gun again, but Jason remained calm, unfazed. You won't get away with this, Kevin said, his voice shaky. I already have, Jason replied coldly. And you're going to prison. I've already made sure the right people know everything. My heart pounded in my chest. I had always known Jason was capable of intense focus and ruthless decisions. But this side of him, the side that was willing to take everything from Kevin and destroy him completely, was terrifying. It made me realize just how much Jason had been hurt, how deep the betrayal ran, and how far he was willing to go for revenge. And then Jason turned to me. As for you, he said, his voice low but not unkind, you've made your choice. You've chosen your side, Emily. And now, you'll live with the consequences. I tried to speak, to apologize, but the words stuck in my throat. I could feel the weight of everything I had done, the affair, the lies, the destruction of everything Jason had worked for. What had I really expected? That everything would magically fix itself? That Jason would simply forgive me and go on with life as if nothing had happened? The truth was, Jason wasn't going to forgive me. He had already made his decision, and now I had to face the fallout. The days that followed felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Jason was relentless. Kevin's life crumbled quickly. Every move he'd made, every shady deal he'd tried to pull behind Jason's back, all of it came crashing down with brutal precision. Jason had contacted the authorities, and it didn't take long for Kevin's criminal activities to be exposed. The press had a field day, and before Kevin could even process what was happening, his company was in ruins. Lawsuits piled up, his reputation was shattered, and he found himself under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. But as much as Jason's revenge played out in the media, it was the personal destruction that hit hardest. Kevin lost everything: the money, the power, the freedom. He had once been the man who thought he could have it all, but now he was nothing. He would spend the next decade trying to piece his life back together from the wreckage Jason had so meticulously created. And me? I thought I had known suffering, but the pain of Jason's indifference was far worse than any betrayal. The love I had taken for granted, the man who had always been there for me, was now a stranger. He no longer looked at me with love, or even the anger I expected. It was a cold, hollow gaze that pierced through me, as if I had become someone unrecognizable. Jason filed for divorce immediately. The papers were served with the same cold precision he had shown in everything else. There was no negotiation, no emotional breakdown, just a quiet severing of the bond we had shared for so long. "Do you really think you deserve anything from me?" Jason asked me when we met to finalize the divorce. His words were calm, but the hurt in his eyes was undeniable. "You lost your chance, you betrayed me, and now you'll face the consequences. You'll get nothing from me, Emily. No money, no alimony. You'll stand on your own." The finality in his voice struck me like a physical blow. Everything I had taken for granted was now gone. The house, the luxuries, the comfortable life, none of it mattered anymore. Jason's rejection was the hardest part. He wasn't just divorcing me. He was erasing me from his life entirely. And Kevin? As much as I had hoped he would somehow be my salvation, he disappeared into the background of my life like a ghost. He stopped answering my calls, stopped responding to messages. The man who had once whispered sweet nothings into my ear and promised me a future was now nowhere to be found. I had lost him too, and in losing him, I lost myself. In the weeks that followed the divorce, I felt like I was living in a shadow of my former life. I had no one left, no husband, no lover, and certainly no friends. Jason had cut me off entirely, leaving me with only my guilt and the memories of what I had lost. I moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I was alone with my thoughts, forced to confront the truth of what I had done. I had hurt the man who had loved me more than anything. And for what? A fling with a man who had never truly cared about me. A man who had used me as part of his petty revenge. As I sat in my dimly lit apartment, the weight of my decisions pressed down on me. I couldn't run from it anymore. I had betrayed Jason in the worst way possible, and now I had nothing to show for it. No career, no money, no security. All of it was gone, taken by the very person I had tried to hurt. Then came the phone call that shattered whatever little resolve I had left. It was from Jason's lawyer. "Mrs. Henderson," the lawyer said in a neutral tone, "I'm afraid you're going to have to vacate the property. Mr. Henderson has requested that you leave immediately." It wasn't unexpected. Jason had made it clear that I would get nothing from the divorce. But hearing those words hit harder than I anticipated. My eyes blurred with tears, but I couldn't bring myself to Cry. What was there left to cry for? I had lost everything, and somehow I didn't know how to face the reality of that. The lavish lifestyle I had lived for so long seemed like a distant memory, a life I had thrown away in a moment of foolishness. But what haunted me the most was how Jason had moved on. I heard from a mutual friend that Jason had started seeing someone new, someone who didn't betray him, someone who valued his love and loyalty. And when I heard about it, a strange sense of jealousy washed over me. Not because I wanted him back, but because I knew I had lost my chance. I had destroyed the one good thing in my life, and there was no going back. I wasn't even a memory to Jason anymore. To him, I was nothing but a painful chapter in his life, one he had quickly closed. As I scrolled through my phone, I saw an image of Jason smiling, his arm around a woman I didn't know. The caption simply read, "Finally free." And in that moment, I realized the true cost of my betrayal. I had lost the man I once called my partner, and in the process, I had lost myself. Months passed, but they felt like years. The apartment that once felt like a fresh start now felt like a prison. The loneliness was suffocating, and I couldn't escape it. My every thought was consumed with guilt and regret. I had made so many mistakes, and now there was no turning back. I spent my days in a haze, working a dead-end job just to keep the bills paid. My life had been reduced to the barest minimum, and it seemed like the universe had conspired to make sure I felt every ounce of my failure. I would pass by places Jason and I had once frequented, the restaurants, the park where we had our first kiss, and each time the pain hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just the life I had lost. It was the future I had thrown away. Jason was no longer in my life, and Kevin? He had disappeared completely. The affair that I had thought would bring me excitement and pleasure had led to nothing but misery. I had destroyed my own happiness, all because I couldn't appreciate what I had until it was too late. One evening, as I was leaving work, I bumped into an old colleague. She was surprised to see me in such a sorry state. "Emily, is everything okay?" she asked, concern in her eyes. I forced a smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. "Yeah, just adjusting." She didn't press, but I could tell she saw through my facade. As I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a world that no longer belonged to me. Jason had moved on, Kevin had vanished, and I was left alone with nothing but the hollow echo of my mistakes. But it wasn't until I received a letter from Jason's lawyer, again, that the full weight of my situation hit me. The letter was short, almost dismissive. "Due to the circumstances of your actions, your access to any financial assets or property tied to Mr. Henderson has been permanently revoked. Any claim to support from Mr. Henderson is null and void. Your request for any compensation will not be considered." I read it several times, the words starting to blur as the finality of the letter sunk in. Jason had made sure I wouldn't have a dime of what I once had. And in that moment, the truth of my situation became crystal clear. I had no safety net. No one was there to catch me anymore. I had no one to blame but myself. And then, there it was. The message that completely shattered what little remained of my self-worth. It was from Jason's new girlfriend, the woman he had been seeing since we split. "I just wanted to let you know that Jason is happy now. He deserves someone who appreciates him, and I think I'm the one who can give that to him. She didn't have to say it, but I could feel the message's underlying message. You lost him, Emily. He's mine now. The pain was unbearable. I had sacrificed everything for fleeting moments of passion, and now all of it seemed so meaningless. What had I really gained? A few moments of pleasure? And in return, I had lost everything that had mattered. As I stood by the window that night, watching the rain fall, I realized just how much I had given up, how much I had betrayed. I had not only destroyed my marriage and my relationship with Jason, but had also shattered any chance of ever finding true happiness again. This was the price of my actions, and no matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't turn back the clock. Jason had moved on, and in doing so, had taken every part of me that once mattered. Time had passed, but it felt like I was stuck in a never-ending cycle of regret. Jason had moved on, and Kevin, the man I thought would be my savior, was a distant memory. My life was now a quiet, lonely existence. I had no one to blame but myself. The pain of what I had done haunted me every single day. It wasn't just the betrayal of Jason, but the fact that I had betrayed myself. The person I had been, the woman who once had everything, was gone. I had thrown it all away for a fleeting moment of excitement and revenge, and in doing so, I had destroyed the only person who truly mattered, Jason. One afternoon, I stood in front of my old house. It looked so different now, empty, cold, and unrecognizable. I could almost hear the laughter, the memories of the life we had built together, echoing in my mind. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, someone who was long gone. Jason's new life was a reminder of everything I had lost. I saw him once, walking hand in hand with his new partner, laughing the way we once did. They looked so happy together, and in that moment, I felt the full weight of my own destruction. It wasn't just that I had lost him. It was that I had destroyed the best part of me. The person I had been before all of this, before the affair, before the lies, was now buried beneath layers of shame and regret. I knew now that no amount of time, no amount of apologies, could ever undo what I had done. Jason was gone. His love was gone. And all that remained was the emptiness inside me, the constant reminder of the choices I had made. As the sun set that evening, casting a golden glow over the city, I knew that my life had irrevocably changed. I was no longer the woman I used to be. The person I had been before all of this, confident, loved, secure, was gone, replaced by a hollow shell of regret. And Jason, the man I had once loved, was living a life that was no longer mine to be part of. I couldn't blame him for moving on. I couldn't blame him for finding happiness with someone else. I had done the unthinkable, and now I had to live with the consequences. I watched as Jason and his new partner disappeared into the distance, their laughter fading into the night. In that moment, I understood. He was finally free of me, free of the lies and the pain I had caused. And though I had nothing left, I knew that I would never be free of the guilt that consumed me. The final chapter of our story was written, and it was one of loss, betrayal, and irreversible damage. I had lost everything: my marriage, my future, and the man I had once called my love. And in the silence that followed, I realized that I would never be the same. The life I had known was gone, and all that remained was the haunting reminder of how far I had fallen.